All right, welcome back to the Ottawa studios of Inside My Canoe Head. I am your host, Dr. D. It's season 13. Let's go. Today we're going to talk about risk, resilience, and preparedness in a chaotic world, because you know what? Something might have just happened on January 20th. Sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. Let's get at her. Love a good beat to introduce a new season. Thanks again for joining us here at Inside My Canoe Head. All of your feedback, everything over at our website, www.insidemycanoehead, is very much appreciated. We are here to provide you free of charge preparedness, risk, and resilience, education, information, and a discussion point. How does that deal with the chaotic world that we see around us? And guess what? We're starting season 13 on day 2 of Mr. Trump's presidency. Why is that important? Because day 1, you wouldn't have got any airtime no matter who you were. And 2, because the internet is literally losing its head over what might happen in the next 4 months, 4 years, or 4 decades. So we're going to sit back and we're going to talk about how does this decision as a frame, like many other things you cannot control, how do you still navigate an incredible life, chase your dreams, rock a life, all while this chaotic nonsense is going on around you? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to begin with a bit of description on season 13. Now, yeah, it's incredible. We started this podcast. We're coming up on 5 years. This is almost episode 325. We blew through the 25,000 download figure, and we're well on our way to hitting 30,000 downloads this month. This is an incredible opportunity to continue to bring you free information. Everything we do here is free. The product that we provide you is what we think is succinct and appropriate and helpful. You get a Substack article under my name, Jeff Donaldson. You get Inside My Canoe Head, the number 2 preparedness podcast in the world, where all that information is discussed in a bit wider, open, more liberal form, shall we say, in the audio format. And then we're going to have a YouTube video coming out to provide you the visual medium for those that like to consume it in that fashion. And that's what we do. All 3 of those are free. We got a bunch of shorts and reels that come out across our social media platforms. And we deliver this information because we believe in non-apocalyptic, evidence-based preparedness education for rational people. That means we actually tell you what's going on in the real world. We're not hyping it up. We're never going to give you the top 10 things a prepper should do or the where to spend your first $400 as a prepper. If you're looking for that catastrophic apocalyptic junk and shite, as we like to say, it's all over YouTube. Have a great time. Enjoy it. Some of it is actually entertaining. I actually watch some of it with a bag of popcorn, so I get a good laugh. The point is that the world is chaotic. It's going up and down, bouncing left and right. Crazy figures are popping up and get whack-a-mole back down. But you're here trying to live your life, rock your dreams, do what you want to do. And your whole goal here is to what? It is to simply reduce the amount of harm that you and your family are exposed to. And that shouldn't be that difficult, and it isn't. But what we're faced with right now is the election of Mr. Donald Trump as the U.S. president. Now, I'm a Canadian, right? So when I say that, I don't get a voice in who the American electorate chooses a leader, nor should I, because I'm not an American citizen, just as they're not going to get a voice in our upcoming election here in Canada whenever it occurs. The point being is that there is a large group of people who have made a conscious decision to literally lose their shit over who won the election. And the audacity of the American electorate to put this person in charge and the idiocy of everything that he says. And people are literally coming unhinged and totally breaking their logical brains apart over an individual and what they say. And there's no logic behind that, right? You can choose to spend your time as a keyboard warrior, pounding the keys, telling the world how horrible this is, or how bad this person is, or on the opposite side, how the savior of the Western world just came in and how we're about to stop the managed decline of Western society. There are people on either side, and I guarantee you for the next 4 years of this presidency, they will expend a massive amount of energy on their keyboards and on their channels and doing all these things, literally losing control of their lives over this individual. The point being is that if you, and you have this choice, and it's totally up to you, if you want to chase your dreams, if you want to rock an incredible life, if you want to go after what is available to you out there, that is a choice that you make. And I wrote a Substack article this morning, and again, it's free of charge. Hop over to Substack, look under Jeff Donaldson, you'll see the article there. And I talk about the fact that we live in a world where very little of what happens around us is under our control. And I'm going to argue with you, I think that's the perfect way, right? The vast majority of events that happen around this world, in your city, in your family, in your household, and all around you are beyond your control. What you have a choice to do is how you're going to choose to respond. And then figuring out when you respond, what it is that's available to you to do and what might happen. And I use the risk, resilience, and preparedness frame on this podcast to try to explain what I mean. So bear with me for a moment here. Risk is basically your exposure to harm. We have yet to develop a utopia where risk is zero, right? You cannot live in a place where you're not exposed to harm. You cannot live in a place where the environment around you may not hurt you. Prevention is almost, I don't use the word prevention other than to make fun of it, because you really can't prevent anything. We can't prevent natural disasters. We can't prevent economic crisis. We can't prevent political crisis. What we can do is mitigate it. And mitigate is a better word. And why do I argue on the words? Because when we mitigate it, it tells us it's within our control, right? I can lessen the impact of an economic decline against myself and my family by employing a certain strategy, right? I can't stop the economic decline that's happening. I can't stop the stock market crash, but I can most certainly set the conditions so the impact against me is less. It's not zero. It'll never be zero. It'll likely never even be nominal. But what I have the ability to do is reduce the impact of decisions that are beyond my control against me and my family, right? So you've decided to choose to live where you live, right? This podcast is downloaded in 68 nations around the world. There's about 200, 201, depending on who declares independence on any given day. So we're in about a third of the countries on this planet, okay? You're going to have a whole series of different exposures to natural hazards, economic hazards, political hazards, cultural hazards, ideological hazards, right? I live in the nation of Canada simply because I was born here. I didn't choose. Here I was, and here I stay. But I'm an adult. I'm in my 50s. I choose to stay in Canada. So by making that choice to stay in Canada, I have to accept the political world in which I operate, right? I've been a clear, unequivocal non-supporter of the current government that exists in Canada for the last 9 years, right? Fine, fair enough. You know, not everybody voted for this guy and not everybody will vote for the next guy. That's perfectly fine. What I have to do is accept that by choosing to live in Canada, I have to accept that this is my government. Democracy simply means I get a say, not the final say. And as much as this buffoon in Canada is not much different than the buffoon that just got elected in the U.S., depending on your point of view, the point is they say all kinds of things, right? And they say things that just, you want to shake your head. You don't understand the logic behind it. But there's always a difference between what a political figure says and what a political figure does. And so the challenge when you're thinking about risk is, in the political event, and I'll just use that because January 20th was yesterday and it's an important event, you have to look past what a politician says. You have to look at exactly and specifically what the policy is the politician is likely to implement. And then once you understand what they're likely to implement, then you can create a strategy, which is preparedness, the intentional action to mitigate harm to your family, therefore building resilience, which is your ability to navigate harm. The three of those words are interconnected. Risk is simply your exposure to harm. Resilience is your ability to navigate that harm. And preparedness is the intentional strategy you undertake when you identify risk, and by being prepared, you increase resilience. That's the basic relationship between those. Now, across academia, there are a number of different decisions. I let those people have their heterogeneous and homogeneous debates back and forth. Have a great day at that. That's fine. But what I'm looking at for you now, whether it's this recent political decision or whether it's an economic crisis, whether it is a natural disaster that happens, or whether it's a cultural, ideological, familial something, you're exposed to risk on a regular basis. The key to success in your life, if you want to consider the risk, resilience, and preparedness frame, is to first understand that risk for what it is. And that's navigating. It's like finding the seeds for the chaff. You've all heard that saying, swinging the chaff in the air and finding the seeds to get your wheat. The whole point here is, in all of this noise that's surrounding us right now, in all of the noise, what actually is influencing your life, not things you disagree with. I could care less whether you agree or disagree with the current U.S. government or the next U.S. government that shows up in 4 years, the next Canadian, the next German government, the next Saudi Arabian decision, the next Israeli government. Like, none of that really matters what you think. What matters is, how is that decision, and what is that actual decision, and how does it influence how you intend to run your life? And what I wrote on Substack today was really understanding that if you separate the truth from the noise as to what is likely to happen, then that's the value and the strength of preparedness. Because when you look forward and you say, okay, as a result of this event that happened that's beyond my control, this is likely going to be the outcome. If this is going to be the outcome, how is that outcome going to affect how I choose to live my life, how I choose to earn an income, relationships, whatever it may be? And then if that is likely how it's going to affect my life, my preparedness is then, what strategies do I choose to employ to mitigate that harm? Remember, we can't reduce harm to zero, right? You can't prevent harm against your family. I know you want to. I want to. You cannot prevent it. But what you can do is mitigate it through first understanding the risk. But the challenge we have in today's environment is fighting through the noise, right? Because everybody's a keyboard warrior. Everybody's calling for how everything will come completely down and be destroyed. And we can go on about what ideological frame you want to use, from politics to climate change to everything else on the face of this earth, right? The point is your ability to see through the noise for the actual policy that a government would bring in, the actual event that's likely to happen, and what an economic impact looks for you. And I'm going to take a second here to talk about economics, because economics is probably just as impactful, and some would argue, and I think persuasively so, that significant economic loss is just as impactful as losing your house. And I've used this example in a number of podcasts and writings before. Losing your house to a fire and losing your primary source of income in a family, I'm not sure which one of those is more impactful, right? I think they're both incredibly impactful, and part of your preparedness plans, and we talk about it here on the podcast about your trifecta of preparedness plans. One of them is to deal with evacuation and loss of your residence, and one of them is to deal with economic loss of your income, because the two of those are probably the most impactful things that could happen to you. Now, you don't know why your house burns down, but you consider the reality of that happening when you figure your evacuation plan, etc. But when you think about economics, most of us don't think of the risk we face of losing our job. Now, that risk is measurable, right? You know what industry you're in. You know what the future impacts in the industry. And this is where politics can come into economics, is because, for example, if you are a current Canadian business that sells goods, physical goods, to Americans, right now, you should be concerned. If you're only just considering the potential impact of U.S. government tariffs now, then you've missed the boat. Like that ship has sailed. That mitigation plan should have been in place months ago, actually November 5th, when Donald Trump won the election on November 5th or 8th or whenever it was. And you realize that he's likely to impose tariffs, you should have been figuring out at that time, a couple of months ago, as to how to do it. So that political decision, which is well within the government of the U.S.'s right to do, nobody cares whether you agree with it. Nobody cares whether you think it's intelligent or not. Nobody cares whether you think it's appropriate. The point being is, if you're in that business and if you draw your family's income from an industry that may be affected by one of those tariffs, you're now existing in a far higher risk profile than you were a couple of months ago, right? And again, this is totally beyond your control. You did absolutely nothing wrong. You violated no rules. You're a great human being. But your risk profile just exceptionally changed as a result of an action outside your control. Preparedness tells you, what are you going to do? What measures are you putting into play? The tariffs haven't been imposed, right? They say February 1st. I don't care. Right now, as of today, as you're listening to this podcast on the 21st of January or whenever you listen to it, as we speak, those tariffs are not imposed, but they're likely to come. What is your strategy as a business owner who sells to the USA? It's full stop. Like, how do you mitigate that? I don't know the answer for you, but that's the answer you have to find. How do I mitigate it now? Because if those 25% tariffs go impact, and if you think that will impact your sales, if you cannot personally avoid that out of your profit margin or take it out of your profit margin, then you're going to have a number of reduction in sales. What does that reduced top line revenue mean for your bottom line in your company? If you're operating pretty close to, if you have very small margins in your business, this may cause you to start to burn excess capital. What's your burn rate? What's your cash burn rate? How far can you go? All of these things are within your control. All of these decisions are within your ability to make. You have the knowledge to make them, and that's the value of preparedness. The idea that you've looked out into the spectrum of the world out there, across the spheres of influence, and I've written a Substack, actually I talked about it in today's Substack article, and I've written about it before. When you think about the world around you, you look at it through areas of influence, planes of existence. Different scholars will use different words for it. But it's basically the political spectrum, the economic spectrum, the cultural and ideological spectrum, the natural spectrum, and your familial spectrum. When you look at the world through those and you understand the risks for which you're exposed to in each one of those, And then you decide which one of the risks are manageable, because guess what, my friends? You can't get it to zero. You have to live with risk. So you have to decide what level of risk is acceptable to you. And that's an individual risk tolerance. You and I are going to be different on that. And then for those risks that you find uncomfortable, what can you do to mitigate that? And by putting a preparedness plan in place, which is risk mitigation, the default is you increase your resilience. And by increasing your resilience, that simply means that when an event occurs that's beyond your control, for which you've taken preparations, the impact of that event is less harmful to you, less harmful to your family, less disruptive to your way of life, and less impactful on what dreams and goals you're after. That's the freaking strength of preparedness, right? I'm not kidding whatsoever. I'm not beating around the bush here. It's not difficult and it's free. Not just because it's on this awesome, incredible podcast here at Inside My Canoe Head, but it's because everything that you need to do to adopt a prepared life, everything that you need to do to mitigate against risk is all about gathering information, looking at the frame, deciding, and then acting. It's all free of charge. None of it costs an expenditure of any money, right? Everything you see here, everything you hear on Inside My Canoe Head, everything over on our Substack, and everything on our YouTube channel and the stuff that we throw around for fun on other social medias, it's all free. And we're giving you this information because we want to help society calm the F down, right? Seriously. Dial back the apocalypse. The apocalypse is not upon us. Society is not failing. But if you're a reader or any type of theorist whatsoever, we know that the 2020s is by design a chaotic decade. And this goes back to Ray Dalio's book on principles for navigating a changing world order. He goes back to about the age of sail around the 1400s when the Dutch Empire really started to expand. Ever since nations became involved as a result of the age of sail in the 1400s, about every 70 or 80 years, humanity has reorganized the global order. The last one was the 1940s. Second World War reorganized who were the powerhouses. You had the two superpowers emerge. You had society set up in a certain way, the Bretton Woods Agreement, the economic agenda of the world. All that was set in the 1940s, and we've lived that to some degree until the 2020s, which is now the time for another global reorganization. So from every event that's happened in the 2020s has all been about countries and nations around the world jockeying for position, elbowing others out, making agreements, friendships, becoming powerhouses in certain areas, taking territory as necessary from other countries to give themselves a better position. That's all that's happening. Now, it's horrible because tens of thousands of people are dying, but this is what humanity's done every 70, 80 years. Absolutely predictable, very much expected, but still exceptionally disruptive. And we're only halfway through, arguably even less than halfway through. And if you look at the extent, this may continue into 2030. As far as 2032 is the only theorist I've heard that the disruption will continue. But if that theorist is correct, and I won't name them because I'm not sure they're very accurate, but you're looking at another 5 to 7 years of significant disruption in global order, economic, politics, cultural, and ideological worlds, all of which will influence how you live your life. So now, if you haven't done this already, now is your time to sit back and say, hey, listen, this crap has got me cheesed off. I'm pretty much done with feeling like I'm being kicked around against my will. How do I do this? How do I stand up, brush the dust off, and figure out how to navigate and chase my dreams in this exceptionally disruptive world? and chase those dreams and realize my goal, but do that while I'm dramatically and significantly reducing the risk to which I'm exposed. That's the goal. That's what we try to do. And whether you're a private small business owner, you're doing the same thing. When you're a business owner, and I own a business called Preparedness Labs Incorporated, it's the parent company to this podcast. So as an entrepreneur, I have to protect that entity, Preparedness Labs Incorporated, against exogenous shocks and influences beyond my control. So I operate in the online education experience, right? That's where the primary role of the business is online course education for entrepreneurs and individuals in building resilience and risk, understanding your personal risk profiles. I'm in a space where a lot of other people are there. I have to look at the political, economic, and ideological and cultural and natural worlds to see how that may influence the business environment in which I operate. I have to pay significant attention to events that happen all around the world and all around me, from the government to the political to the economic to whatever sphere, so that I can understand the risks that my company is exposed to. That's what entrepreneurs do. It's the same thing we're suggesting you do in your life. So if you're like me and you have both professional and personal ideas, that's what you have to do. And what we did is in Preparedness Labs Incorporated is we developed a 160 question profile check for a risk profile. That's part of both our courses for entrepreneurs and both our courses for individuals and families. And basically what that does is it asks you 160 different questions, and you rate your risk profile as low, medium, or high against each situation. And after 160 questions, what you get is a list of high things that you believe, based on your risk tolerance, represent a high risk to you and your family, your goals, and your dreams. Gives you a very specific roadmap for then how do you design a personal preparedness plan that's actually based upon the risk profile that your family is exposed to. And this is the point of the issue, because each one of our families are different, and I think that's incredible, right? Moms, dads, moms, dads, and dads, and ideologically and culturally different, and we have, multi-generational, multi-location families. It's all freaking amazing. The point being is that your family and mine are likely very different. We have different interests other than our basic animalistic requirements of food, water, shelter, health, safety, and security. Beyond that, our families are dynamic, they're different, and that's what makes us a fabulous society, which means I can't give you a 10-step process, do these 10 things, and you'll be prepared, because there's so much difference between our families. Our education system at Preparedness Labs Incorporated, and what we talk about here free of charge on the podcast, is first understanding your family, understanding your family's risk profile. That then informs what you should do and how to develop a preparedness plan. You can't create a PDF form filler for a preparedness plan, folks. Anybody who's telling you that is missing a massive part of what preparedness represents. And what happens is most of what we hear about and talk about in preparedness world is geared to the 20% to deal with natural disasters, right? So fires, floods, hurricanes, whatever. People focus preparedness in that area, but that's just 20%. The other 80%, and I'm going to argue with you, the more impactful and important elements of preparedness resolve in other areas of the world, in the political, the economic, the cultural, the ideological, the familial spectrum, the entrepreneurial world, your business interests, your professional pursuits, your leisure activities. All of these things are more important than worried about whether the power goes out at home. That's preparedness, right? Wrapping your family's life in a blanket of preparedness so that you can chase your dreams. Understanding risk is not about abandoning what you want to do, living in a bunker and waiting to survive the big bad day. It's about getting out there, getting after it, but doing so in a way that doesn't expose you and your family and your dreams and your entrepreneurship and your ability to earn money to unnecessary risk. And that is what we're trying to get across with this first episode in season 13. One day after Trump takes over the White House, and everybody thinks either the savior has arrived or the apocalypse has arrived, depending on what your point of view. The whole idea of today's conversation here is just that. Dial it back, take a deep breath, figure out if there is something in the noise that might actually realistically affect you, not offend you, couldn't care less whether you're offended, to be honest, but actually affects how you're going to do your life. Because guess what? We're surrounded by fools, buffoons, idiots, and ridiculous ideology all around us every day. And if you run around spending your life choosing to be offended and triggered by everything that happens around, and then you decide to consume a great part of your day building anxiety and stress over things you cannot control, it's you who are dramatically and negatively influencing your life. So yeah, I laugh. I shake my head at a lot of stuff. I giggle at most of it, to be honest with you. I just like look at it and go, what a dumb arse. And then I move on. Why? Why do I move on? Because none of that helps me chase my dreams, right? There's a great quote that I opened my LinkedIn article this morning on was, we are in control of very little, and that is perfect for all of us. And it's a bad summary of Stoic philosophy that simply says, you only control what you say and what you do. Everything else is beyond your control. So why are you getting bent out of shape intentionally over things that are beyond your control? How does that make you more happy? How does that give you more joy in your life? How does that make you chase your dreams? None of it does. But yet, if you just take 5 seconds and read Twitter or go somewhere on Facebook Meta or Blue Sky or anywhere, all of these places are just full of people losing their brain cells over what's going on for no intent purpose, right? I just want to be heard. I want to be one of the many. I want my sayings out there. I want everybody to know how upset. Why? Why? Are you a narcissist, or are you suffering from something that requires you? I'll offer you this, and I'll close with this today. Ed Sheeran is a great music artist. I think he's brilliant. And a very funny man, and a very intelligent man if you sit down and listen to some of the interviews, other than those, not talk interviews, but you actually go to some of the interviews that he's done. And he makes a very good point about Instagram, right? And his view on Instagram is this. Instagram is a sales platform, right? So people on Instagram should be there to consume and buy products or to present products for sale. When you see people living their best life and they're putting it up on Instagram, he classifies that as a cry for help. Somebody who desperately needs the world to validate what they're doing and is in pursuit of the likes for position and value and happiness off of that. And he says it's the cry for help. And we should feel for those people, and we should reach out to them and try to help them. That's just a different view of Instagram and what social media is for. But if you look at social media now, it's hilariously bent one way or another. Everybody's screaming about misinformation and disinformation. Everybody wants either censorship or free speech or some wildly incoherent combination of the two. The point is, through that noise, you, as an intelligent person, can identify actual and real events that may impact how you and your family want to live your life. And by understanding those, identifying your risks, creating a preparedness strategy to mitigate those risks, you will by default increase your resilience, which I'm going to argue with you will increase the probability that you will have that dream, that you will succeed in your dream. You will not, there's no guarantee of success like there's no guarantee of failure. So get out there, get after it, and have a good time. Listen, thanks for joining us this week at Inside My Canoe Head. Welcome to Season 13. We ask simply that you drop over to InsideMyCanoehead.ca because we're great Canucks. Have a look at everything we have to offer over there and share with your friends and family that this podcast exists. We talk about non-apocalyptic, evidence-based preparedness education for rational people, right? Real stuff. Stuff that's helpful. Risk, resilience, and preparedness. It's how you're going to win when everybody else is crying on the floor and flopping about how triggered and offended they are. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you again.